topics that are going to be on your final. This is the topics we're going to focus on for our review. So first thing is we're going to remember how to solve radical equations. Rational equations. Remember, rationals are the ones that are fractions. So there are two methods for solving those rational functions. You can either cross multiply or you can find common denominators because it still is a fraction. So your hint, when you cross multiply, when to know to cross multiply, is you see a fraction equals a fraction. So something like that. Fraction equals fraction. That's when I would cross multiply and solve. The second hint, when you need to find common denominators, is when you see adding and subtracting signs. So you might have a bunch of fractions and they're being added or subtracted. Still works just if we had a normal little fraction without all the variables in it. We would still have to find those common denominators before we could add it. So, for number one, we've got fraction equals fraction. So that means we're going to cross multiply. Alright, so we've cross multiplied, now we actually have to go through and solve it. We're going to distribute 4. Then we're going to get all of our x's together and isolate our constants. Move 4x over. And the last step is to get x all by itself by dividing by 5. So our answer is either negative 8 over 5 or negative 1.6 if you made it a decimal. Okay, number 2. We've still got fraction equals fraction. We're going to cross multiply. And it doesn't matter which one you write first. You could have done 3 times 2x minus 4 on the left side, so on and so on. It doesn't matter. Now we're going to cross multiply, to distribute. Distribute again. Alright. Now we've got variables and whole numbers or constants on both sides of the equation. So we're going to decide which side we want all of our variables on. The other side is for all of our constants. Alright, last step we're going to divide by 4 because that's in front of x. So we get an answer of x equals 4. Okay. Number 3. Still got fraction equals fraction. Distribute. Get x's all on one side. Move our constants to the other. So because there's nothing in front of x, that means I'm done. So x equals 11. Alright. Number 4 visually looks different because it's technically a fraction equals something that's not a fraction. But remember with fractions, anytime it's just a number all by itself, it's understood to be over a 1. So now we've actually got the visual fraction equals fraction. So we distribute out. Now, we've got an x squared. I can't solve this equation just by moving x's over and simplifying and dividing. When you see that x squared, and it's not going to cancel out with anything, you need to be thinking set it equal to 0. So we can do the x method or factor it some other way. will set it equal to 0, and we'll add 12 to both sides. Now, none of those things on that right side, x squared, negative 7x, and positive 12, are like terms. I can't combine them anymore, but now I've got a trinomial, and I can do the x method for it. So, once I've factored it, I'm going to set each of my factors equal to 0. And I'm going to solve for x in both of them, and that gives me 2 answers. Okay. Now we've got fractions with addition and subtraction signs in the middle of them. So this is where we're going to have to go back and find common denominators. So in this very first one, if I look at all of my denominators, I've got a 3, I've got an x, and I've got a 4. So my common denominator, if I look at it separately, would be 3x and 4, or I could say 12x, either one. So now I want to figure out what is missing from the denominator that is already there. So if I look at this first one right here, that 6 already has a 3, and it already has an x. The only thing it needs is a 4. Because remember, if I do it to the bottom, I've got to do it to the top. So 6 times 4 gives me 24. The next one is 5/4. That 5 already has the 4. So it needs the 3 and the x. Alright, the last one is 3 over x. That 3 already has the x. It needs a 3 and a 4, or 12. Now, because all of my denominators are the same, I drop them. That's why I didn't write them over the common denominator. So now I'm going to just solve. If you're unsure about your answer, you can always take what you solved for and plug it in to see which one, if it works or not. So, the next one. Now we've got a little bit of a different look. We've got something a little bit different with the x squared, and we've got x plus 3 in our denominators. So we're going to have to add a step into this one. First thing I want to do is I want to factor that. That's a difference of squares. That x plus 7 doesn't need anything. It's got the common denominator already. If I look at the next one, that x only has the x plus 3. It needs the x minus 3. Alright? The 1 needs everything. It doesn't even have a denominator. So instead of having to do x plus 3, x minus 3, I'm going to shorten it to that version, x squared minus 9. So now I can distribute. Alright, I see x squareds. I see a negative x squared and a plus x squared on the other side. I know, just based on the rules of math and how to solve an equation, that those x squareds are not going to cancel out. So I'm going to go ahead and get it equal to 0. Alright, I also have a few like terms over here that I can simplify. here needs to move. Okay. Now, we've got a trinomial. So first thing we need to be thinking is x method. Well, with this x method, it's going to be a little bit different because we've got a 2x squared instead of just an x squared. So the first thing I'm going to check for is to see if I have a common denominator.